Last week, the US credit rating was downgraded, and no one seems to really be talking about it. And that's probably because right now, in this economic environment, nobody probably gives a crap about the US credit rating. With that said, this is actually the second time this has happened in just the last few years. And while the credit rating, in my opinion, probably doesn't really matter, it doesn't really affect us directly, at least right now, the implications and the reasoning behind why the credit rating was downgraded is important. And if you're under, I would say, if you're under 50 years old, then this will directly affect you at some point in your life. And if you're under 40 years old, if we don't course correct, this will have a major effect on your life at some point. So let's talk about it. As always, my name is Derek, and I got my degree in finance. You don't have to. Let's dive right in. So first and foremost, just to get this out of the way, the U.S. credit rating was downgraded. Now, the credit rating downgrade itself isn't really that severe, but the reasons listed are something serious. The reasons listed for this downgrade primarily revolve around the amount of debt that the US is carrying. On top of that, they also revolve around the government's basically unwillingness to fix the problem. Or if it's not unwillingness, it sure isn't action. Because what we have and what we've had for decades is a budget that is not balanced. And you might be saying, well, why does that matter? It matters because the US economy is maturing. Now, I've said on this channel before that the US debt by itself doesn't really matter. And I'm going to give you an example why. But what does matter is the US debt to GDP. Or some people might even take it a step further. And they might say what really matters is the US debt to tax revenue. That's because tax revenue is basically the government's income. So I'm going to give you an example first and foremost to explain to you why the debt by itself doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to show you and highlight why this is going to become a major problem at some point in our life. Okay, so first and foremost, if you make $100,000 per year, okay, and you took out $20,000 because your lifestyle requires $120,000 per year to sustain, fine, that might not be the best decision, but your debt to income is probably okay. Okay, then the following year, let's say now you have to take out another $40,000 again to sustain your lifestyle. But let's say in that second year, your income also increased to $200,000 a year. The ratios remain the same. And again, maybe not the best scenario. It doesn't really matter though. Let's say the following year, now you have to take $60,000 out to again sustain your lifestyle, because as your income grows, so does your lifestyle. But again, your income grew to $300,000 per year. Again, is it the best decision? No. But is it detrimental? No. The problem, and here's the major problem, is at some point in your career, your income growth is probably going to plateau or stagnate, right? And then what really becomes an issue is that the following year, if you have to take out $80,000 to sustain your lifestyle, but your income didn't grow, or it grew at a lower pace. Let's say now it only grew to $350,000 instead of $400,000. Okay, is it detrimental? No, but it's starting to maybe raise some alarm bells. Okay, let's say the following year, okay, you had to take now $100,000, right? You had to borrow $100,000 to sustain your income or your lifestyle, but now your income only grew to $375,000. Okay, now there should be some serious alarm bells ringing in your head because your debt is growing not exponentially, but constantly, and your income isn't. Okay, we are getting close to that when it comes to the United States. Okay, for the last 20 or so years, we lived in this euphoric, maybe not euphoric to everybody, but in an economic sense, this euphoric tech boom, okay? The internet exploded, and so did the U.S. economy when it came to services, finance, tech services, healthcare services. There's been a ton of innovation that has been basically allowed, or the fertilizer to this growth has been the tech industry, okay? What I'm starting to see, and what a lot of economists are starting to see, is that what we are doing is the deficit for the budget, it's about $2 trillion, okay? Tax revenue is roughly $5 trillion. It might actually be less in the coming years. about $500 billion is seemingly to be taken away from tax revenue if this new tax bill passes because there's tax cuts. But the deficit spending is most likely not going to go anywhere. And in fact, it's probably going to grow. So what you end up having is you have a country that is continually spending more than it makes, yet the income might slow down, both on a GDP metric, and some people might take it further and compare debt to tax revenue. And when it comes to debt to tax revenue, we might actually have a shrinkage. So that's like borrowing more money. Let's say you made $300,000 a year, and but you're borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, and now the next year your income's actually going down to 280, and the following year might go down to 270, but you keep borrowing more money. That is a major problem. So whether we look at it from a GDP sense, the tech boom is starting to. You see this with basically innovation everywhere. The example I'll use is iPhones. Okay, for the first 10 iPhones. The innovation was insane. Every single new iPhone was mind-blowingly better than the previous one. Processing power, etc. But now you look at the last 5 or 6 iterations, and the changes, yes, they're meaningful, but they are not as drastic. Okay? And you see this in basically every sector, especially those revolving around tech. The innovation is slowing. So then you have to ask yourself, what is the next catalyst? Is it going to be artificial intelligence? Maybe. Is it going to be blockchain technology? Maybe. But we don't have those for certain yet. So unless we find another catalyst, we're going to eventually start to plateau. And if we continue to borrow and borrow and borrow, our ratio between the debt and the GDP is going to increase significantly. And that is going to be a major problem. And when you look at it from a tax revenue perspective, one, if GDP diminishes, well, then tax revenue is going to diminish. But on top of that, if you have tax bills that rely on more deficit spending, yet at the same time you are literally losing tax revenue because of tax cuts, that is basically making the situation even worse. So a few videos ago, I talked about how I actually think this tax bill for the average American is probably okay. But we're talking immediate relief. When we look 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future, this is still going to cause problems because you're adding to the national debt, which is already above $36 trillion, and you're adding to deficit spending, which is already at $2 trillion every single year. And you're entering an economy, or the economy is continuing to barrel towards a direction where eventually we're going to run out of ways to grow GDP. Not only that, but population growth is also stabilizing. And this is why people start to say, hey, we might be in late stage capitalism, because what ends up happening is this whole system, this capitalist system, which again, I've gone on record saying, hey, it's the best system we have. I support capitalism because right now it's the only system that actually has worked long term. And we can argue all day long in the comments whether that's true or not. But for the most part, what's happening is that capitalism requires GDP to grow because retirement accounts, the stock market, home values, basically everything that not just the very wealthy, but the average American requires to be able to retire someday, all of those rely on and require assets to continue to grow. And the only really two ways for assets to be able to grow is either to extract more money per person, basically, or to expand your population. So how do you extract more money? Through innovation. So if we're hitting a ceiling there, then the only other way to do it is by expanding the population. That's why companies are constantly looking for new or emerging markets, right? But eventually you hit population growth stagnation as well. And then you basically end up in a late stage capitalism system where companies are just trying to extract as much money as possible because everybody knows we're reaching a limit here. So this debt signifies underlying serious issues to the US economy and to the global economy and to the capitalist system because we are running out of innovation and we are running into a population growth ceiling. So this debt, to me, while it's not going to be a problem today, It's not going to be a problem next year. It's probably not going to be a problem in the next 5 years. It's going to be a problem eventually. And as someone who is in their early 30s, I look to the future of my life and I say, this is going to matter. This is going to directly affect me at some point. So that's why, and I think 50 or below, it's going to affect you. 40 or below, it's going to severely affect you. And then I feel for younger generations, for people younger than me, because it almost seems like the best time to have been born already passed. And I'm hoping that we can find more innovation, new markets. I mean, maybe one day expand through the solar system, right? But right now we're living on Earth. And right now we're going to run into a wall. And here's the major problem. And I want to end the video on this. The major reason that nothing really is ever changed is because the people who run our government are usually above that age threshold. Okay. So all they care about is getting reelected. Okay. Because they know that this problem is not going to affect them. They're going to be long gone before this problem actually materializes. So for them, they'd rather deficit spend because social programs, etc., which don't get me wrong, I am a supporter of social programs, but all these programs, as well as the military budget, spending money on the military industrial complex, I mean, it's everything. Lobbying, all this stuff benefits them. So they deficit spend because it's just easier when you print money and you deficit spend. It's easier to get reelected because it has short-term gains, right? But it's almost like a drug. If you actually think about it, it feels good. It feels euphoric right now. But the long-term effects are going to be severe. So we have this mismatch where our government leaders, they're above the age threshold. They don't care. And then everyone who's going to actually suffer in the future at some point are screaming that, hey, we're running into a problem. But again, our elected officials who can control this stuff, I mean, they're past the age threshold, so why would they do anything? They just want to get reelected. So I'm going to end this video by saying term limits. I say this all the time. We need term limits for Congress. We need term limits for the House and the Senate. All our elected officials, it should not be a career choice. It should be a civic duty that you do, and then you re-enter the real world. If you like personal finance, world economics, and investing broken down as simply as they can be, then you're in the right place. I hope this video was informative. If it was, please consider subscribing. Helps the channel tremendously. And with that said, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.